About 20 years ago, I got a phone call. I'm going to give you a brief background of this.
Thank you.
Uh, I got a call from a gentleman I had never met. He had worked in Owens, Illinois as a vice president, and he was at that time in retirement living in California. He knew me through my association with the Blade. That's the only connection. He said, I am putting a book together, and the title is Riding the Fence Lines. And the thrust of the book was that all religions, somebody from that religion should talk about their faith. But he made a condition. It is not going to be a cookbook. Islam believes in blah, 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 blah. Christianity believes in this. He wanted something to be written in the light of the experiences of the writer. Not about the religion, but the writer's passage through that religion and his experiences. So I was not convinced. He sent me one chapter that he had written, and when I read that, I thought it was good. So I participated. I wrote a chapter for that book. That was published almost 25 years ago. So what I have given you is the chapter that I wrote in that book. It's the reprint of this one chapter. That book is out of print, unfortunately. There was a rabbi, there was a Japanese priest, there was a Catholic priest, a Protestant minister, and there's one or two other faiths. There are people. Not all of them followed his advice, and they talked about the religion in a very mechanical thing. This is what we believe in, blah, 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 blah. So, since what I'm going to talk to you about today, it has some bearing. So I brought these reprints for you, and you can either read it or you can dispose it off, and if you're very good at making aeroplanes, it's a good paper. you can make the aeroplane. Anyway, I have other reprints too, and if anybody wants more than one, please, you are welcome. Okay. So I'm asking a question. Would the real and true Muslim please stand up?
Okay, learn definition of a real Muslim. Then I'll decide whether I stand up or lay down.
Well, the question is that you don't go to a seminar or a lecture to learn whether you are a good Muslim or not. That's the whole premise of my talk, the dilemma of judging others. That's the premise of my talk. Yeah. So since none of you stood up, I feel that you don't feel confident that he says, spring up and he says, yeah, I am.
But you're standing.
I am by necessity. I'm standing but by necessity, but it will be another year and a half that I'll be able to stand. Other than that, I probably will sit down and lie down to hear this.
Thank you.
Okay. Abdul Wahab, could you please turn these lights down a little bit? I found a good use for the chairman of the board of trustees. That's wonderful.
Yeah, instead of going nothing.
Somebody said, you know what? Abdul Wahab, this comment on that meant for you, by the way. Very good to say. Somebody said to somebody, said, you know what? You're so useless if God has given, it made you a rock At least one could hammer a nail. All right. I'm going to bring up some difficult subjects in this talk, and I hope you will be with me. A premise of my talk is that we want every Muslim to be like us, individually. We are quick to judge. In the world, in the Muslim world, there is a wide spectrum of Muslims who are different than others. You remember my fair lady, the great Rex Harrison says to Aliza Doolittle, why can't she be like me? Right? What it says, I am the standard. Why can't she be like me? We use the same logic to see, we don't say it, but I'll give you some examples that we act that way. So, a common but misleading refrain. We are all Muslims, and therefore there is no difference between us. I mean, if we're talking about it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. I thought it was an Egyptian mic. So
That's great.
one day we were sitting in many years ago in a council meeting, and this one person remarked, exactly, we are all Muslims. So I wrote that person a long letter. I didn't want to have a discussion there. And I asked the person, I said, do you see any differences at all between this mosque and some other mosques? And are those differences significant? We're not talking about the core values, which everybody believes, but I'm talking about the secondary issues. Well, in private, then the person did tell me that it was understood. So, if there are no differences between us, then I ask a question, where did the Hanbali and the Shafi and Hanafi and Maliki, and what was the reason for them, these imams, to have a different interpretation? And then not only that we have, then under the Hanafi, we have the Deobandis and we have the Barelvis from India and Pakistan. And they will not offer prayer, salah, after each other's imam. So the refrain is, we're all Muslims, right? There's no difference. And then we have these different silsila, what they call it, of the Sufism in Islam. So these are just the percentages that humbly are mostly Saudi Arabia, Qatar, 15% of the Sunnis, Shafi'i 25%, Indonesia, Malaysia, Palestine, Jordan, Afghanistan, Yemen, West Africa, West Egypt, East Africa, Hanafi, mostly India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Turkey, Syria, UK, and Maliki, North and West Africa, UAE, Kuwait, and Egypt, Lower Egypt. But these two are coming from the Hanafi. So please remember, I want you to have this refrain in your mind, and this says, we are all Muslim, we have no differences. Yes, we are all Muslim, but we have differences. And how important are those differences? Are those differences important enough for us to stand up and kill each other? Or to embarrass each other? Or whether we should just accept each other as we are? I mean, that is the basic question that we have. Now, I am going to share with you a diagram. It's just a circle, right? And the circle of the faithful. Take example of a tree, an oak tree, big oak tree with a big shade. That is Islam. Everybody who professes to the core values of Islam, they are in that shade. Similarly, anybody who professes to be a Muslim, he or she is in this circle, circle of the faith. So the things get interesting. We consider that Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the center of that circle because we emulate him. His sunnah has been for 1400 years for us to emulate because he is the perfection, but he's not with us anymore. We have people who are religious scholars. So that's where the problem starts. Who is in the center? So, does al-Baghdadi in the center of that circle?
Who's Baghdadi? Who's Baghdadi?
Al-Baghdadi, who was the head of ISIS, who
Oh,
was
the
in
Baghdadi.
Baghdad, and he claimed himself to be Khalifa. Khalifa is, in the concept of Islam, the ruler of the Ummah, right? He claimed to be a Caliph. Now he's taking that place which was taken by the Prophet, right? Now, please remember that we are all Muslims and there's no difference between us. I want you to think that, keep that in your head. It's important. So, anybody heard of name Mullah Omar?
Yeah.
Mullah Omar was the head of the Taliban. This light has to be turned down a little. I have to find
Something just
people
happened to
for
your
the chairman
projector.
of the board of trustees. Oh, good. Okay. Mullah Omar, who was the president, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he called himself, okay, of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. That's the first
Khalif.
Taliban government. I almost met him, by the way. Yeah, but I didn't. But I almost did. I went to Afghanistan in 2000. The Taliban had been in power for 4 years. No, 4 years, yeah, at that time. And I had a stack of letters written personally by somebody who were their mentor, Afghanistan, Maulana Samuel Haq. And he had one letter for Mullah Omar and for the higher. So in Kabul, I met almost everyone. Mullah Omar never moved from Kandahar to Kabul. He lived in Kandahar. And it was a very arduous journey. And it meant I had to come back to Pakistan, travel to the southern Pakistan, and then go to Kandahar. And I should have done that, but anyway, I missed that opportunity. But Mullah Omar claimed the center, or his organization claimed the center. So, where I am introducing these doubts in your mind to get away from that regret. Now, these are the 5 scholars. There is another one, Zahari, also in the Sunni school of thought. But there were 1 Shia and 4 Sunni madahib. And you can say Imam Jafar Sadiq, the Shia, and then Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, and Imam Hanbal. And they broke the mold in conventional and traditional thinking. Why did they do that? If Islam was complete, as the Prophet had said, were they bringing a new innovation? No, they were not. They were simply interpreting what was there. And their interpretations were different. So that means that they, and we all look up to them, right? As the four main madahib. So they were, and actually they were the founders of this schema which I showed you before. So the question arises in the light of all this, is there a litmus test to judge a Muslim? In my view, my humble opinion, the litmus test is if somebody professes to God and the prophecy of the Prophet and the basic tenets of the religion, that's the litmus test. And the litmus test is not to see how adhering, practicing a person is. Because if somebody says, I believe in Salah 5 times a day, you are not going to go and check at his home whether he does 5 times a day or not. And the other day we were talking about it, that there is a group, that if you belong to that group in this town, you can become a member, but to become a full member, 2 or 3 people have to vote on you to see whether you're a good Muslim or not. Yes. That's true. I mean, we don't have that litmus test, right? Yeah.
We specifically designed it not to have it.
Well, I mean, you can have if you want to, but this creates a lot more problems. Religion moves from being a spiritual experience to a mechanical 1, 2, 3, 4. But if, and when I say pillars, the pillars of religion and the post or the secondary beliefs that we have, I think those will be, so there is a common refrain. In Urdu, this says, "Apna qibla durust kar lo." In other words, if somebody says the other person is not doing it right, he says, "Why don't you straighten the position of your qibla?" In other words, you are not like this, you are like this. Come on, do that. So a dear friend of mine, his name is Zahur, he's a well-known cartoonist, and he drew this cartoon at my request. And this is pertaining to the Taliban. They wanted the Soviet Union to be out of Afghanistan. They fought. And what happened when the Soviets were defeated? They started fighting with each other and slumped the country into a civil war for 10 years. So Zahur made this cartoon. It's in my book, The Taliban. And that is, everybody has a Qibla, right? Who's to say which Qibla is correct? Because we have our own opinions, and those opinions may not be right. And here are the people, and I give you one more example is, there were some ulama who went on an official visit to Saudi Arabia. And it is in the Prophet's mosque. And as you know, for the dignitaries, they open the mosque even if it's closed. So they opened the mosque with this Pakistani delegation. It was the time for Salah. And I mentioned that earlier, that they will not say their prayers after one imam or the other. So one group, within this group, had their Salah and then the other one did that. In Prophet's mosque, So this brings me to another issue, and that is that we are always saying, look at, we had a great golden history. Look at what the Abbasid and the other civilizations, look at what the Umayyads did in the Iberian Peninsula, in Spain and Portugal. If we take credit for myriad achievement of Muslims of yesteryears, then we must make them our ideals. Would the likes of the Imams of yore, I give you the list, or the Islamic scholar philosophers of medieval times survive in today's xenophobic climate? Hell no, they will not. Will the philosophers, Ibn Sina, Al-Zakriya, all of them, would they survive today? No, they will not. And needless to say, they had difficulties in their own times also. Yeah. But now we worship them. But if they were physically here, my God, we will persecute them. So here is the thinking. Our thinking is so skewed sometimes, it is hard to believe what to do. So, and we are still discussing hijab, niqab, separate entrances for women, and we hardly ever talk about domestic violence. So when the imam, every Friday, any imam, I'm not talking about one imam, all they do is to take a stick, and I feel that way, I don't know how, and hit me on the head to be good, because that's what Allah said. Well, I know what Allah said. This is what Prophet practiced. I know. Let's talk about domestic violence. Let's talk about the issues which are eating us from within. No. On Friday, many Fridays, I will be honest with you, I'm disappointed. Why is it that we have to keep repeating the same thing? We talk about Ghazwa Badr or other Joe had fine, they were very important landmarks. Let's take some lessons from that and incorporate them to the contemporary issues to the Muslims. To my knowledge, I just recently learned that there is a shelter in Detroit for Muslim women. There has been a shelter in Chicago for Muslim women. The shame on the so-called Ummah when there is a shelter in Chicago because the husbands have kicked those women out and they have no place to be on the street or to be sheltered. What have we done? Individually or collectively done? I think these are the issues that we need to address. And Friday, sermons, members, khutbahs would be a great vehicle to bring those issues in front. So I'm going to bring a subject of ijtihad. Is there a room for discussion, conversation, and interpretation? Ijtihad literally means struggle, jihad, interpretation of religion according to times. Who was the first one to do ijtihad? Omar did that. And on what subject it was? And the Quran says that when you have a bounty from a battle, and then you spread it so that the non-Muslims will be attracted to become Muslims. Omar says, no, we have enough of believers now. There is no need for this. Will Omar survive today? No, he would not. But this is part of our history. He reinterpreted according to the times. And those times were not 1,000 years apart. They were hardly within the scope of 30 or 40 years. But ijtihad can be a double-edged sword. If you let everybody do ijtihad, personal ijtihad, then you lose somewhat the cohesiveness of a group. So a simple process was made extremely complicated. The gates of ijtihad were wide open for 300 years. Wide open. Then fearing a free-for-all, they were closed shut, and different layers were added that have made ijtihad nearly impossible today. Ijma, Rai, Qiyas, you go through this and you have ijtihad. Has any ijtihad been done? Not to the best of my knowledge, by this process. So the key point is interpretation, reinterpretation, and reinterpretation. And as I mentioned, Caliph Omar Raziullah did that. Can we separate religion from culture? The person who tried to do that was Abdul Wahab in Saudi Arabia. He stripped religion of all the cultural trappings, everything. They wanted a very Spartan religion. In Saudi Arabia, they still do that, but there is a lot of culture there. So there's a story that Imam Malik bin Anas, who was one of the founders of Madhahib, he codified Islamic law. And at that time, the Caliph Al-Mansur in the Abbasid rule wanted to implement one uniform law throughout the Islamic realm. Imam Malik persuaded him not to. Because he said, whatever I have done, it is good for this time and this place. Because when Islam went to different places in the world, it absorbed from the local culture. So when you go to Indonesia and Malaysia, all have not drastically different Islam, but they have some cultural nuances to them. And he did not want to stop that. Please.
If I may add, that's a beautiful statement that you made. That when he went to Iraq, they said, "Hey, get your Muwatta." That's the book that he created. Is the Muwatta, the jurisprudence. And he said, "No, this is my interpretation, and it's subject to change according to culture and time and what have you."
He said that. Yeah.
Muhammad Idris al-Shafi'i, which is the student of Malik, had a jurisprudence when he was in Iraq, in Baghdad.
Egypt.
No, first he was in Egypt. He was first in Egypt, and he created the jurisprudence, the book. And then later on, he went to Egypt, and he experienced a different culture, a different need, a different society, and he came up with a new jurisprudence. So that's what I would like to.
Thank you for adding. But the thing is that
To add to what
Please.
he said, Maliki criticized Shafi'i when he was in Egypt. And he said, this is not the way we do things in Medina. And Shafi'i wrote him back and said, but I am not in Medina. I am in Egypt, in Masr, and the customs and the traditions here are different than those that are in Medina. Therefore, my fatwa has to address those traditions.
Right.
And we take it as a positive
It
criticism.
is a positive.
Positive criticism. Now,
well, thank you for adding that. The basic thing is that they had different interpretations and did that. So the question arises, why then and why not now? So I was having a lunch many, many years ago with an imam. And I brought up the subject. I said, how does one differentiate one imam from another? All of them have the same thing. Who's going to do the thinking? By the way, if you don't know, that after the medieval Islamic scholars died, God decreed that the intelligence should be taken away from Muslims. Yeah, it was just done. Yeah, then whenever somebody asks a question, they rush and get 600-year-old book and to see what a particular person said. It's just, this is it. As if that writing has been confirmed for all the ages to come. That is not true. The intelligence and the intellect, people still have it. But why are they using it? I have limited knowledge. I cannot do the scholarly work. I don't have the training. But the imams should, because the door has been opened. Nobody has shut in their faces. So I was having lunch with this imam and I said, why don't you, vibrant and everything else? He says, you want me to divide the community?
But that's not the issue. He does not know our American jurisprudence.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, this was the answer. Okay? The answer is let everything be nice and nice and nice. Unless you bring in some subject, and it doesn't have to be right now change overnight. It has to be subtle change.
Increments.
Right.
Incremental, right. But I just gave you my example that none of them are doing it now, to the best of my knowledge, whatever I read. They are, what to say, taqleed. They are following whatever the others have done. And it's the word taqleed, right?
Imitation.
But what's the word in Arabic?
Taqlid.
Taqleed. Yeah. Yeah. They follow. Yeah.
But you know, there are several problems. I'm not going to go through all of them. When you have an imam who's a Shafi'i, he does not want to switch from that point of view, from that interpretation. I have already talked to many imams. And when there was a case, and that's the reason I went into Islamic law and family law, is because there were women who were seeking divorce. They had grounds for divorce, but the imam was a Hanafi imam, and he said, according to Abu Hanifa, the husband has to initiate the divorce. Therefore, she cannot have a divorce. And I looked at him and I said, according to Islamic law, a person can choose any madhab they want, any school of law they want. He said, well, I can't do it.
Okay.
So they went and got it. I helped them get a civil divorce. And
I mean, you put your finger on the problem. That is that if we are open-minded, let me give you the example of Imam Fatah. Standing here, he will give his lecture. And he said, accept whatever resonates with you. I mean, he always said that. Whatever really resonates with you, accept that. And he always says, use your head. Nobody told him that the intellect from our heads had been finished. Nobody told him, he didn't know that. Yeah. We let others do the thinking. We are not part of that discussion. So let's keep moving. So let me give you the intolerance, which I mentioned in the beginning. Not only that we are intolerant to each other as Sunnis, but we are also intolerant of other faiths and also the sects within Islam. I'll give you just one example. The Shia Sunni schism. I will not go into the detail why and how, but how do Sunnis look at Shias? You'll be surprised. This is from Pew Research Center in 2012 as a worldwide study. They've done extensive study. In Iraq, 14% of the people think Shias are non-Muslim. Why? It's low because in Iraq there are a lot of Shias. In Lebanon, 21% think Shias are not Muslims and 77% think they are Muslims. And Tunisia. But look at Morocco, 50%, more than half think Shias are not Muslims. I mean, these are startling statistics. They are being practiced today in the world. And the differences between the different madahib in the Sunni school of thought, and I mentioned that earlier, are there. Using conventional yardstick of measuring Muslimhood, where would you place the Taliban and ISIS? I mean, it's a question. I don't have the answer.
Non-Muslims.
Well, see, it's very easy for us to say non-Muslims, but let me tell you, I was having lunch with a scholar. I'm always having lunch with these people and picking their brains and come back really frustrated and disappointed. So I was having lunch with a scholar of Islam. In those days, ISIS was in the news. And I had seen a video where the ISIS people had led some Muslims and non-Muslims, and they slaughtered them on the video. This was on the internet. You know, they will take the persons were there lined up with their heads, and they will go. Each one will pick up a knife and walk and go to the person, and then they will cut their heads off. And I said, this is a barbaric practice. Islam does not permit that. His answer was, looking back in the history of Islam, these things have been done. Does that make it legitimate to do it today? That is the only answer he gave me. And I pressed him. So, in my view, my limited view, the scholars are as guilty as the imams are. Because they don't want to move out of their comfort zone.
No courage.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think a lot of scholars did say that what ISIS was doing was wrong from the Islamic point of view. But this one particular person was going back in history and saying, but it has been done before. Does that mean it's permissible? No. So I could not get an answer. So I stopped having lunches with these people. I still welcome them.
You didn't.
But let's make it clear that the Taliban and ISIS and all these different movements, these are political statements. These are not, we can't say this is Islam. I mean, they use.
You can say this, but you can say what you're saying, but they think that they are practicing real Islam.
Sure, but who are they? They are a very small portion.
Who are they? If in Toledo, Ohio, I cannot get a scholar of Islam to say what ISIS is doing is wrong,
That's who they are.
and I showed you the circle of believers. Al-Baghdadi thought he was in the center. Mullah Omar thought he was in the center. So there was another scholar. This time I didn't have a lunch, I had breakfast with him. And the breakfast was at my home. And I brought up a subject. He was a visiting scholar to the Islamic Center, and we had breakfast at my home. And I said, the people, the Muslims, within a circle, are under the shade of a tree. If they profess to the basic principles of Islam, and they are in this circle, and everybody is thinking that he is in the center, his answer, Wallah, this is what he said to me. It is wrong. But they all should try to get to the center. And who was in the center? This man. He didn't say that.
Gotcha.
He didn't say that. But he
Oh, why the-
said that he was, all those people have to crawl to the center. And I thought maybe there are many centers. And where I am standing, you are at the periphery. I mean, look at that. It was I have not mentioned any names, have I? No. Okay.
Just three.
No, I have not mentioned any names. Because I want to protect the guilty.
Yeah.
So, no Muslim scholars have come out against the atrocities committed by ISIS. And as I said, they always look back in history and say that such practices have been part of Muslim Ummah. That was not the difference. Yeah.
What defines a Muslim scholar? Maybe they're not scholars.
Well, no, they are, because they have gone through the process of studying religion and history and have gotten their higher education. I consider them scholars.
But how does that make them a scholar? If they're not willing to take that scholarly
It's a different
knowledge,
opinion.
or
Different opinion. Yeah. I am objecting to them. I will not say they are not scholars, they are scholars. But they are not looking at things, what happened in the past in the present context. They are. You want to say something? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
You have a beautiful description of everything. You talked about the fact what Shia, Sunnis think about Shia. Are there any research what Shias think about Sunnis?
Yes, a lot. I have not brought this purposely,
Okay.
and I have not even brought the sect which have been called non-Muslims. I mean, that's a different conversation.
Okay.
So, using conventional yardstick, measuring Muslimhood, Taliban, I witnessed that myself when I was there. Taliban invented a yardstick, and I'll show you that yardstick. This was very common scene in Kabul when I visited, that these Taliban will beat up women, burqa wearing women. To them, the height of being Muslim was the woman to be shrouded, put behind closed doors in a home, men to have a beard. They asked me repeatedly at every when you go on the road that they have checkpoints, at every checkpoint. Brother, you don't have a beard. I said, I'm a Khariji, which is a Persian word meaning I'm from the outside. Where are you from? I said, I'm from Peshawar. But you're a Muslim, aren't you? How do you counter that? For them to be a Muslim is to have a beard. So, their interpretation of Islam is different than what we interpret in Pakistan. But this was a common scene, disgusting common scene. So, here is a question for you, all of you. Who is the true Muslim in this group? You're talking about Rashida Tala?
Yes.
Okay, but maybe you and I are a minority.
Yes.
You see, the refrain which I try to instill in your minds is, who is the real Muslim? I think all those women, deep in their heart, are Muslims. And my mother wore this until she came to America. And then she was wearing a shawl. So I told her that once you abandoned the burqa, my father turned in his grave. She came many times to America, as some of you have met her. Behind that burqa, I have no idea what kind of, well, probably they have no education whatsoever. Yeah, I can say that. But other women have education. I cannot have it. People like this are welcome to Islamic Center. Women like this are welcome to Islamic Center. This Islamic Center. Even a person like that, we have seen some niqab. Welcome. We haven't seen any burqa. Welcome. Is that true of all the mosques in Toledo? So the refrain that we are all Muslims and we are just like each other, it's nonsense.
That seems to be true.
Okay, I think I'm toward the end of my presentation. Let's thank God for a place that we have. What has Islamic Center do? Men and women enter through the same entrance and pray under the same dome. We were the first mosque in America, I believe, that we decided, with the help of Islamic scholar Imam Khattab, that we could get mortgage. This mosque was built on mortgage. And the person who really committed the biggest sin is sitting in front of me.
He's still in power.
This mosque was built. This mosque was built on money borrowed from the bank. Holidays determined scientifically. I don't think Salah or me or anybody will ever climb up on the minaret to look for the recent moon. With the cooperation of the Department of Astronomy and the University of Toledo, we did. Islam belatedly came back after about 30 years and said that this is something which is acceptable. Yeah. Women in leadership role. I often say this thing that when we elected Sharifi, it was predicted that there would be a lightning bolt which would come and hit the center. So with that, I told the story that there was this imam. None of them, it's just a fictitious story, kept saying to his hitting on the head, be good, if not, a lightning bolt will come and hit you. Kept saying this thing, every time. And one day the lightning bolt did come and hit the imam. So, and Muslim in the leadership role, in the forefront of interfaith dialogue. I think we have broke ground We've been called many things. But this is a cartoon I showed before, but I'm showing it in a different context. If we keep following, regurgitating, the plea would not get us to the next station. Because as we are, the train ain't coming.
Yeah.
We have to lay the tracks, make it possible. So in summary, spectrum of Muslims is broad and wide in the world. One size does not fit all. Local communities decide what works for them while staying within the circle of believers. Important, within the circle of believers. No one has the right to be judgmental and tell others you are not as good as I am. The shade of the tree of Islam is deep and expansive. Anyone who professes to the basics of Islam is under the shade. That is the famous circle. And that brings me to the end of my talk. Aziz, you had a question.
Yes. In a few words, where do you place Salafis within the framework that you explained?
Just under Wahhabi. Just under Wahhabi.
On the Wahhabis?
Yeah. It is mostly a Saudi Arabian, but it has gone to Yemen and maybe a few other countries. We thought that Wahhabis were the strict. Well, then they have another Wahhabi too, and that is Salafis. And Salafi really means Salaf, means ancestors. Yeah, that they follow their ancestors.
The Salaf is those people who practiced Islam at the time of the Prophet.
Yeah.
Those are the Salaf.
Yeah, but mercifully, they are not in majority. We are a small group, and they are in Toledo also, as we all know.
The Salaf, we considered the four imams, the four jurists from the Salaf Salih.
Well, you could do that. You can even bring in Abdul Wahab if you want to. No, but I think that they modified and from one madhab, and then they whittle down, take all the cultures scrapping out and become the most basic. Yeah, that's my understanding is. Yes. Abdul Wahab, may I request to turn the lights on?
Better get somebody else to do it.
Huh?
Better get somebody else to do it. We
I
want
think
them
we
on.
We have to train them.
Now?
I-
Look, see, the lights aren't on
We
yet.
have to train them.
There- So I have a question about,
Go ahead.
during the days of the Prophet, did the mosques have two entrances, or was it just one entrance for men and women? Do
To
you
the
know?
best of my knowledge, one entrance. So here's a beautiful story.
We're not an innovation then. The other mosques are.
I have it. Well, it was Umar ibn Khattab's son who prevented women to the mosque.
Oh,
So Umar was giving a khutbah, and he said something, and one woman got up and he says, "No, this is not the interpretation."
It's about the Mahar.
And he says, "I accept." So all my friends who are not like me, they say, "Look at it. A woman can get up and ask the Khalifa a question." I say, "Well, that's not the point. What the hell was she doing there anyway?"
But they played together at the time.
Yeah. And do you want me to boggle your mind a little more?
more?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can take it.
Okay. So let me look at.
You do it.
Most of the men were going for a battle, and a one woman came to Prophet, And he says, can woman lead the prayers? And he said, yes. When some scholar will say, not the ones that I had lunch with, some scholars will say that it was permitted for women. The women can lead the prayers. But no, if you really dig down, there was no distinction made.
Make that clear. She led the prayers for both men and
Yes,
women?
yes. And that's why one Islamic scholar, Wadud,
Yeah, Amina.
Amina Wadud in New York did that. And guess what happened?
Oh,
People like us surrounded the mosque.
yeah. I did my dissertation with her. She was with me in the classes.
Oh, history is terrible, it's discomforting.
But to go back to the Wahhabis, Abdul Wahhab took the philosophy of Ibn Taymiyyah, who was a medieval scholar, and he based his own interpretation from that and created the Wahhabi faith, or way of interpreting the Quran. And they're basically literal. They take the verse from the Quran, they literally interpret it as is, whereas the other scholars use other methods. Rather than, for example, ثم استوى على العرش, and God, after creating the world, sat on the throne. The Wahhabi believe there was a throne and God sat like we sit. And the other scholars say, no, this is
Metaphorical.
this is terrible. No, God is not like us, which is true. ليس كمثله شيء.
Yeah.
God subhanahu wa ta'ala, God is an entity. One cannot describe him, whereas the Wahhabis of God.
But he was more of a political understanding. He wanted to get the Sufism out of the way and the Shia out of the way.
They are very literal, and they don't believe in icons. They don't believe, for example, if you go to Saudi Arabia, the graves are flat. There is no stone, there is nothing.
But that's what their main thing
But
was.
they're very basic, very simplistic. And it's very, very narrow interpretation, and it does not deviate.
But us Muslims, we look up to him like we look at the four jurists, like we look at up to Ahl al-Hadith. We don't look at Abdul Wahhab or Ibn Taymiyyah or even Muhammad al-Ghazali. There's certain things that we like about him, but the main figures of Islam are the four jurists and
Not necessarily.
al-Bukhari, al-Nasa'i.
There were-
No, Bukhari,
Bukhari-
Those are Ahl
Hadith.
al-Hadith. Those are Ahl al-Hadith. Now,
The thing is, you cannot limit whatever it is. Ahlul Hadith are people who
quoted.
spoke the Hadith, recited the Hadith. However, it was never collected. I mean, that's another.
Yeah.
So we're not gonna go.
Abdul Wahab.
I'm going back to the ijtihad. Is our issues really ijtihad? Or our issues is our rigidity of accepting, because I believe there is ijtihad. And I'm seeing that from reading from Al-Azhar for years and years and years. I think it is our the rigidity of Muslims to accept ijtihad in itself. Because ijtihad is there, people don't accept it. People always go back to the very old history. So I don't really know if we are characterizing the Muslim issues correctly or not. Because when we say there is no ijtihad, there's also, I don't believe this statement
Yeah,
Correct.
is really correct.
Any ijtihad that deviates from the basic scholars has become heresy.
Yeah, this
I mean, look at the
okay, this is
result
the
what they
issue. One
did to
second.
him. They made him a kafir and
Okay,
they threw him out.
why that is happening? So it is not an issue of ijtihad. It is an issue of accepting ijtihad. This was my problem. We need
Yeah.
to characterize
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
issue correctly. So we know where is the issue.
But
You're saying there is ijtihad.
There is ijtihad, but we don't accept it. We are very rigid. We have to go back into the fourth school of thought, and we end with problem.
But we cannot stay with the four schools of law because things have changed, things have evolved. We have issues that we have to deal with today that they never had before.
Fine.
And therefore, we are not allowing the new ijtihad to take root in our society. I mean, we're regressing. We are not progressing. We are regressing totally.
I agree with you 100%. But this is an issue of ijtihad or an issue
Of accepting
of
the new
accepting
ijtihad.
ijtihad.
Yeah, what the same thing.
You're right.
So like I'm a truck driver, right? So I've been around to a lot of different mosques around the country, and I've seen this, you know, I've seen the differences
Yeah.
based on where I go. Because like then I get confused because I only know from this mosque.
No,
So then they're looking at me like, "What are you doing?"
Listen, we are all confused.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But then I see the cultural makeup of the differences in the mosques that I'm at. You know, like I don't think like many of the Minneapolis area is predominantly Somalian, right?
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, right? But then I look at them and they're doing other things like the brothers stuff. Now you got to do this stuff. You got to do this. The culture's there, And so it's like, oh, okay, it's culture is different. But you also say you cannot separate culture from religion. In some comments where it's impossible, and so we accept this, right? So it's kind of funny that you complain about ijtihad, but you say we cannot separate culture from the religion. So then you only can complain about the ijtihad in the area you're in, because you're saying it's acceptable to have ijtihad here. But culturally, you're saying the cultures that are in the area are not agreeing on the ijtihad that we can have, right? So it's cultural differences clashing by all of us coming from a different place, thinking the ijtihad we want belongs here.
Right.
So how do you differ what ijtihad can be had?
But
It has to come to some kind of vote within the community to be accepted.
But look at the people sitting here, okay? Pakistan, Palestine.
West Virginia.
Egypt,
What did you say?
Pakistan, Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt,
Toledo.
Toledo. So we, in this community here, there is no homogeneity. We bring our own baggages, but we have shed them and found a common ground.
You found the basis still, but you're asking for ijtihad that roots back to where you came from. Otherwise,
No, we want to do ijtihad here.
so I'm saying you can,
But you know, the
but
problem
I'm
is,
saying you can't ask the world to accept the ijtihad you have here. That's never going to happen,
Right.
because we're all too different.
Right, exactly,
Muslims.
you're right.
But here, if you want ijtihad, and you want the imams and the scholars here to open that door, it can be done, but you're going to have to find some kind of voting process for the ijtihad to be accepted, because we all have roots, and we'll go back to those, even though we're here, and you say we shed them, you never really shed your cultural identity. It's not really possible. Your family's still from
but whenever,
what you know.
but look, whenever culture does not adhere to the tenets of justice and equity and compassion that are the basic of Islam, then that culture should be thrown out.
I agree, but who's
So
to
culture
say?
can play a role, and even the Salafi, the ones that go back to the Prophet, I wish they would go back to that time. Because women argued with the Prophet. Aisha, the Prophet ﷺ said, take half of your religion from Aisha, which means women have a big role. So if we want to go to the Salaf, let's go to the true Salaf.
Yeah.
Not the stuff that took away the rights of individuals and the essence of what Islam is all about. And when the Prophet was told by the Quran, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he was sent as a mercy to the people, to make life easier, full of compassion. If we go back to that setup, I'm all for it, but we're not.
Well,
We're
let me
deviating.
be clear.
Okay,
You know,
this is the last statement, because then we're gonna go for prayer.
Yeah, let me be clear, when I say the cultural differences, I'm also ignorant to the cultural differences. I'm not thinking of any culture here as a white convert who doesn't know what issues really live when it comes to ijtihad. So forgive, it's a blanket statement, not an attack on any differences or
I need to
yeah.
talk to you about the
Well-
various differences in the Somaliland.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.